You can't. Anybody have any comments or corrections?
Jean has nothing.
Lowry?
I have none.
I already commented.
Okey doke. Nancy? Of course, you weren't there.
Yes,
Okey doke. So may I have a motion to approve the?
I understood the minutes were,
Yes?
I thought the minutes were clear. I understood what was going on. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank Jean. Okey doke. May I have a motion to approve the
I
minutes?
move that we accept the minutes as prepared.
Second? Anyone?
Second.
Thank you, Karen. All those in favor, and I'm going to do this by roll call. Jean,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Mark Haskell, welcome to the meeting. We're approving the minutes from the last meeting, and I know you weren't there. Jim Hurd,
Yes.
Lowry,
Yes.
and Deb Dodge. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the rest abstain from approving the minutes. Thank you all. Jeremy, welcome to the second Zoom charter meeting. And we're here to get your feedback and comments that you have on Article 7, the growth management and long-range planning. Do you want any introduction from us or Lowry before you give us your feedback, or are you comfortable with what you've read and the background you've gotten?
Just so you know, I don't have a lot of background. I mean, for me as the planning and development director, what I have, I have the comprehensive plan that was adopted by the town in 2017. And I know what that says. And I've heard, talk here and there about comp plan implementation committee and growth management stuff on the periphery, and not a lot of talk about it. I don't know the history on how we got to this point.
Okay.
I'm trying to include something like this in the charter. I don't know that history.
Lowry, do you want to jump in here, or do you want me to give?
Yeah, I think I can fill in the background. The comp plans, as well as some other big study plans that Camden has done in the past, tend to get completed and then put on a shelf somewhere and gather dust and not get used. When I met, as the comp plan was being developed, one of the things that the comp plan committee talked about was, let's recommend in the introduction that the select board establish a very small committee to keep an eye on all the question strategies and recommendations to kind of keep poking them along so that they wouldn't just get lost. All the while acknowledging that some will disappear as needs, there will be new needs arise, priorities will change. When I met with Audra, the day after it was announced that she was going to be the town manager, the first thing she said to me was, will you have a comprehensive plan implementation committee? And I told her that was in the introduction to the comp plan, and she said, that's great, it's really important to have it. So as we were going along through the charter, we thought that the charter was kind of the only place to put that recommendation that this implementation committee be put together. And we also decided to adjust the whole notion of continuing comprehensive plans there. Since the SPO has disbanded, comprehensive plans and updated comprehensive plans are no longer required of towns. So part of the discussion with Bill is that while the kind of official language from the state is that we may require a comprehensive plan to be done, that if the citizens came and felt strongly enough that it was really important to us, would it be okay to say shall be done? And his decision was, yes, we're allowed to say shall, but it's kind of a political decision on, do we want to say shall or not say shall? And then if we say shall be, that the comp plan shall be redone every X number of years and updated and so forth, then shall we create this implementation committee to kind of keep moving along the QS&Rs without stepping on the toes of the select board or any of the staff, you and Audra primarily, that would be kind of in the midst of all that. So that's largely how we got here and what the discussion has been about. I think the consensus of the committee is that we think it's really important that we maintain the Camden citizen involvement in these kind of more global planning ideas, and that we find some way to keep the comp plan in the public discourse without stepping on any toes of people who are involved in things that are actually portions of the comp plan that are ongoing.
Understood. Yep.
And one addition, if I may, is it really sort of started when we had Roger Moody come speak to the whole charter about some of his recommendations based on, his history of years as town manager. And he said, we don't have anything in the charter about a growth management plan. So.
And something else too is if we decide that we want to have the comp plan redone every X number of years, who are the people that do that work? John French had argued pretty strongly to open it up to citizens. Well, we've done that the last 2 times. The comp plan was rewritten, and we never had more than 3 citizens raise their hand and say, please, I'd like to participate in this. And so by default, it went to the planning board. So I think our suggestion is largely, let's have the planning board kind of manage this process and do the bulk of the work, but at the same time, be very open and encouraging for citizens who are interested to come forward and participate. It's one of the things that comes up is if it's a planning board responsibility, it's very easy in the charter to say the planning board is responsible to do this under the direction of the select board. But if you want to form a separate committee to do the comp plan, then you have to address who's on that committee, how are they selected, how many are there, what are their terms, all the normal committee stuff that's got to be stated somewhere. So that would just be more language we would have to add to the charter.
Okie doke, Jeremy, you're
Sure.
on.
Sure.
I have a question. It's Nancy. Nancy has a question.
Go ahead, Nancy. Nancy, you have a question before Jeremy?
The minutes said that John French, just asking for clarification, because in the minutes it said John French recommended that citizens be involved in the comp plan committee.
Correct.
That he made a point of saying that. So I just wondered, can you say more about why he felt that way and what he said?
I think Lowry addressed it. I think he really felt like we needed the broad input from citizens, which we have done in
Everything.
plans past. Yeah, yes, Mark?
Yes, I've talked with John about this a little bit, and the idea of having citizens on it is a wonderful idea. But the planning board itself is citizens. They are members of the community, they are citizens, and they are there by either appointment or however they get there. So I think it's covered by having the planning board do it.
All right, Jeremy.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot there, and I really understand. I mean, I've been with the town, and I don't know everyone here. I don't think I've met most all of you. I have not met, and Jean, I don't think you and I have met in person. So, and Karen, I think we have met at one point. Jeremy, I've been here for 2 years now, or 2+ years. So, I mean, I get where all this is coming from, and I understand, I think I really have a solid understanding of the town and these issues. I will say, just to start, I worked in municipal government field for 20+ years, if you count when I worked with a quasi municipal agency over near Winthrop, out of Winthrop, which was part of Reedfield, Winthrop, Manchester, Monmouth, Litchfield, Wayne. So I've really been involved in municipal government at the town level, very small town level, kind of, and now in Camden, a mid-sized town, and also at the city council, city level, working for the city of Bangor for many, many years. And I've always been in the field of land use. And so I think I do bring land use and permitting and enforcement and planning and watershed planning. So I do, I understand where everyone's coming, and I understand the need for planning. I just want to say that, with that said, it is sometimes very challenging in small town, in town meeting form of government, town form of government, for whether it be community development issues or economic development issues or environmental protection issues. It can be very challenging to be nimble enough to respond to emerging issues that come from the community. You know, I really feel like, you know, especially in Camden, everyone is there are so many, and Mark talked about citizenry and what's his planning boards. Yes, they're citizens. All of you folks, every committee that the town has, we have so many committees, and they're full of citizens that are engaged in this process. So I do think the town forever will have this engaged community. I do hesitate on mandating in a charter things like shall, because I think sometimes you can, you know, if there's a certain way things need to be done, rather than being nimble enough that the select board, because the way I read the charter, I've read through the charter in preparation for this meeting. I read through the charter, and the select board has responsibilities, the town manager has responsibilities, and then there are department heads that are allowed to be created, departments that are allowed to be by the select board and managed by the town manager for specific needs. I mean, I look at the position that I'm in right now that are emerging in a community. You know, there was never a planning and development director position in Camden up until 2.5 years ago. Prior to that, there was, you know, a community development director, and there was a code officer. And prior to that, there was a economic development director and a code officer. And prior to that, it was a code and a planner joint person, and they had some support. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that over time, it's clear that the needs for the town have changed based on a lot of issues, whether it be political issues or economic issues or community development issues. And I think you need to be nimble enough and just administration of municipal government at a town meeting form of government, that there's a lot of, that the select board can, you know, based on what their roles and their procedures are, can implement a lot of things, and based on what the citizenry are asking for. And it might be the cause of the day. I mean, that is what we're all living with. And then the town manager administrates that through either he or herself or through a department head. And so I just think that's important context from just someone that has been working in municipal government for a long time and trying to manage whether they be housing issues and housing projects, development issues, large scale commercial projects that are good, you know, good for a regional or community economy. You know, I've done that and been there for a long time. And I think if you go down this road, and I will also say, not only did I review the charter quite extensively, I looked at probably 20, 25 other charters from a variety of towns, you know, in Maine, and how how the charter was formed, like laid out, and what was included in the charter and what wasn't included in the charter. And it was really hard for me to find any other communities that really get really deep in implementation of comp plans and growth management in the charter. And I think there's a good reason for that. And I think I guess what I was trying to get to is everything I just said right now. Sometimes you can't do it as nimbly, as quickly as a need may arise in the community. You know, like I think of Belfast, I think of Bangor, some projects like on the waterfront, and Belfast and Bangor. You know, sometimes those projects, which are hugely important for the region and for that municipality, for jobs and, you know, for all of that vitality of the community, it's hard to always make those things happen in the pace that is needed from, you know, the economic scale. and that's just one comment I have. So if you do decide to go down the road of including comp plan and land use, I know in the charter it talks about the select board shall appoint to planning board. I would suggest saying more may. It's clear that things like a zoning ordinance will always be in place in Camden. There's no question. So those kinds of things, if you want to put the town shall have, and you see it a lot of these, 20 plus towns that I looked at, they have things like the town shall have a planning board. The town shall have a zoning ordinance. And then if they want to include, they may, the comprehensive plan is super important. I will say the town relies, we've been getting a lot of grant money recently. And a lot of the money that's tied, a lot of the federal and state dollars that we can get and even foundation dollars that we're seeking, and we do get a lot of, there's a lot of programs that require you to have a comprehensive plan. So it's clear, I think we'll always have that. And I think Lowry's exactly right. I've been in this field for 20 plus years, and when the state planning office headed by Evan Rickert was gutted and then went away. And I've been a certified code officer for 20 plus years in Maine too. And I'm on the MUBEC board, which oversees the building code board. And I've seen the training that has waned over the year for this kind of stuff. And it's unfortunately, it was, there's certain administration did not look at this stuff as important. It's critically important for the state of Maine. Planning and land use, growth management is critically important. But I think through the committees we have, it's a great comprehensive plan. And I'm just going to say something about chapter 20, which is the planning and community development plan section. It provides for the guidance of the implementation of it. And within it, what's so amazing is all of these sections, even the other sections of the ordinance, have all of these committees that we have. And so if we're going to go down this road of an implementation committee, or how in the future are we going to think about and update our comprehensive plan, my recommendation would be, there's so much in this about that every pretty much town committee is supposed to be dealing with, right? Recommendations for the, whether it be CDAC or the Harbor Committee, or, there's a ton of recommendations, Conservation Committee, the Energy Committee, and it's all in here. I would suggest, and the select board in recent years has tried to focus the committees to a work plan to keep them moving forward and everyone understanding where they're going, and staff trying to staff that and support that. I would recommend that we stick with kind of what the comprehensive plan says, where it asks these certain committees to do certain things. And when the time comes to do a comp plan, I would suggest, if I'm on the staff still then, which I hope to be, I would say to the select board, what I'd recommend is that every one of these committees forth a member to be the comp plan committee that reviews that and tries to update it. Because they're the ones that are intimately involved in, whether it be the downtown or the energy issues, or economic and community development issues, or the historic resources committee. And I think we're seeing some of that in some committees. If you look at recommendations from each section of the comp plan, we're slowly picking away at certain things. The historic resources section talks about developing kind of a more formal historic preservation work in town. I worked with the Historic Resources Committee to bring that demolition review ordinance in, to the voters. That overwhelmingly passed. And so I think there's kind of, you have the foundation with interested and engaged groups in Camden, committees, to really tackle some of these questions and these issues. And I think the comp plan already kind of implies that that's what they're supposed to do. That's how I read the comp plan. And so I think you're in place, and Lowry's right. In the intro to the comp plan, it does talk about 3 to 5 people. I think that's the only place in the whole comp plan it mentions that. And I'm not trying to belittle what that says, because that's important and that was in the intro. But when you go through the guidance for implementation of it, it does lay out the boards that are significant and should be at the table. that's, I mean, I'm just throwing that's how I would approach this. And sometimes these things are easier when we're just having a kind of a conversation. And I wanted to get all that out for this conversation. So I don't know if that helps.
No, I think it does. If I may say something, what do you think the appropriate mechanism is to keeping people's feet to the fire to make sure those things
Are happening.
are in progress? Is it
Yeah.
just a political will from the community saying, what are you doing on the comp plan? Why isn't this happening? Or I think perhaps that maybe some idea of what a comp plan implementation committee may be about is who keeps their feet to the fire to get things done.
Yeah, I frankly think it should be the political and the select board, because they're the ones that are voted by the people. And that's how I personally feel. And you all may not feel that way. And that's the wonderful thing about town government and, democracy in America, is that we all have different opinions. But I feel like there's representation because that's what we put those folks up there to do. And if you look at the charter, it does say that they shall, they have a certain role, and that role is then handed over to the town manager to do certain things. And if the select board decides for a period of time, we don't want to care about for the next 2 years about historic resources, I'm just saying, not, because we have other priorities like wastewater and stormwater and all of these other things, then that's going to get the focus. It doesn't mean that other stuff's not a priority or not valued in town. And you always have those other committees, which I think what the select board did wonderfully a number of years ago was tell the committees, please give us a work plan, and then let the select board go through it. And those work plans, they evolved, they changed. Some things were added, some things were, for each committee. That's kind of how I would envision it. And I almost feel like every committee that the town has that has something to do in this comp plan should be given the comp plan and said, as part of your work plan, start here, because there are a lot of things. This was approved by voters in 2017. And everyone said, and I know lots of voters, they're just going to approve it without reading it all, right? Not everyone is engaged as all of you folks and those that put it together, but it does, those citizens that put it together said, we want these committees to be doing these things. So I would suggest they should come to the select board or we should say something, or I should, to the select board and the town manager that, it's in this comp plan that these committees are supposed to be doing certain things. And I would probably say most of them are all aligned already in the comp plan, but get those committee members to read those sections that they've kind of been tasked with or supposedly tasked with doing. And that's where that is reviewed annually by the select board. And I think that's going to continue. So if nothing gets done, I would expect the select board to say, well, why is that still on your work plan? Didn't you do that? That's how I would approach it, Deb.
Mark, I saw you nodding your head a second or two ago. Would you like to comment?
I was basically in agreement with who keeps the feet to the fire, the selectmen and the town manager. They're the ones that are elected and appointed to do it. And if they're going to follow the rules, so to speak, then they will be on top of it. Or they should be.
Karen, I also noticed you nodding. Was there some comment, Karen Grove, that you want to make?
Nope.
Okay.
I am not at all in anything I'm saying that planning. I'm the planning and development director. This is what I do, and I've done it for a long time. This is significantly important things for a community, right? But we have committees for that purpose, in my view, and that should be their role. And growth management is significantly important. All of that is critically important. But those things change over time, and those needs change, and sometimes they can change in 6 months or in 3 years. And I think you need to be flexible enough and not shall. I guess that's where I'm really getting at, because, and I appreciate Lowry, comments about the reports, all the reports have been done over the years and they're sitting on shelves. I understand that, and I've seen lots of reports just sitting on shelves over the years. I've also seen lots of those reports used over the years. Not all of them are shelved. I look at, we're looking right now at the public landing because of sea level rise and some infrastructure improvements that are desperately needed down there. I look at the T.Y. Lin report and, the public landing report, and then I look at the Wood report that was done more about the infrastructure, what we have and the needs kind of that are down there. Those reports are all really good. The landing report that was done, but it didn't take into account a lot of things that we would take into account today, like sea level rise. And it was done like a handful of years prior. And so, even I'll say the tannery group that worked on that they did it was a really concept plan, and concept plans and these plans that get put on shelves and are used over time, they sometimes are either in such a sketch or schematic form that they don't go into enough detail that people really understand what needs to happen. And I just trying to just say that there's sometimes, unfortunately, reports do get put on shelves, but the ones that are valuable to that community keep living. And I think we have a great comp plan, and you've got existing structure in there to try to keep this on the front burner. It's impossible for any committee, any town to try to do everything that's in this comp plan in 5 years. Just the way town government is. We have 2 town meetings, one in June and November when we can vote on things. So if you think about that, it's hard to do a lot, all of this at one time. And so I think just letting the whims of the needs of the community of the time be flexible enough, have the system be flexible enough that government can cater to those needs of the citizens at that time, rather than being kind of forced into certain places.
Things can be overtaken by events.
Yes.
OBE. I think we all kind of understand that things age out and are no longer really applicable because the needs have changed in the community. Jean, do you have any reaction or comment you'd like to make?
Well, I've been involved one way or another, either covering town government or involved in town committees for about 40 years. And I must say there are times when I've been very, very frustrated because people either have short memories or, as you said, Jeremy, there are things going on, things do change. So in some respect, you'd like to see someone somewhere be the point person, be that you, be that the town manager, not necessarily pointing another committee, but somehow someone being a point person that that they are watching, they are looking at the comp plan, or they are keeping in the back of their mind, oh, this is happening now. In the comp plan, it said maybe we should just double check to see if that committee is aware of the situation and they're going to be looking into it. So I agree with you that things happen and people are working. We have great committees and they're doing things, but I've seen things slip through the cracks for years because somebody was not looking out for it.
Nancy?
Yeah,
Are you
I have
there?
some ideas about it. I've noticed that even when people are hired and are staff, of course, institutional memory only lasts as long as the people who are there, and it really is unlikely to get passed on that comprehensively. And so often people, a town is reinventing the wheel, rehashing the same thing, the same issue, but what's happened is the people involved who are doing the hashing are different. And I found it really instructive to listen to what Jeremy said, and while listening to him, I think about the fact that the people involved in town who are not elected positions or paid to do a job are all volunteers. And volunteers who are presumably doing their best. We're an older community now, so with so many older people, sometimes people won't get to meetings or are unable to do what they had in mind they wanted to do, even on a committee, because there's might be a health issue with them or their families, and so to have another layer, which is what the proposed comprehensive plan implementation committee would be, another layer of people who are trying to make sure that certain things got done. It seems to me not quite in the spirit of volunteer community working together. I think it's too much to kind of mandate to people that they do that when they're volunteers, but people can commit to things with the work plans. And so I really loved the way that Jeremy talked about it, and his ideas about bringing the comprehensive plan more to the fore, so that when issues that came up regarding the snowball or anything we were doing in town, in a committee or with the select board or with the staff and town manager, it was measured and against what was in the comprehensive plan, which was the will of the citizens at the time, and that is referenced. That to me would make more sense, and sort of a gentle, organic way of proceeding by incorporating what's in the comprehensive plan into the committees.
Thank you.
If I stated what Jeremy was kind of saying.
I think you did it in like
Or
probably
suggesting.
15 minutes less than I did.
Lowry, any
Um,
comment?
Yeah, I think it has to bubble up. That's what I thought of, bubble up. It bubbles up from the community, and sometimes our community has great spurts ahead, and sometimes things slow down a little, and that's the nature of all of us who make up the town at the time, and what the stressors are or the energies at any given moment when we kind of gather together in these groups and committees. It's like waves of the ocean and the tide, you know? The tide comes in, everybody has energy for a while, and then things kind of slack off for a while. And it just seemed to me, watching Camden in 30 years, that is how it works here and in a lot of places.
Thank you. Lowry?
So a couple things. I think that while the select board certainly plays a very vital role, they are a political organization by any definition. You know, they run for office, they get voted in, they work on things that are important to the town and important to them. And as such, I think their recency bias can raise its head among political organizations. And I think it's less likely to raise its head among more permanent organizations, particularly like staff. So I think that while the recency bias is clearly important, I think we also need to look at some of the things that might be more boring, but could be very important to the town in the long run. We need to continually hear from the people, because the people ultimately are the ones that decide what's important and what's not important. And I think that an small implementation group would give the opportunity for people to be involved in that. And we can't just rely on the individual committees that are named as the individual staff people, and in some cases, the individual clubs that are named in the QSR, because sometimes those committees get disbanded. You know, for instance, the Harbor Committee has disappeared for a while. We used to have a parking, traffic, and transit committee that was active for many years. I was on it way back when, and that one's all gone. And we may find a need, hopefully someday, we will no longer have to try and figure out what to do with the Channery, because that work will have been done, and we won't need to do that work anymore. So clearly there's times when you need to add new committees and sunset committees that have served their purposes. But I think you still kind of need somebody looking forward and saying, okay, you know, this is the direction we generally want to go. I think it does some of the I don't recall how you referred to it. Some of the quick flexibility that was evidenced in Belfast and Bangor was available because they were a city council form of government. We're not a city council form of government. We're a town meeting form of government, and that creates some slowness in decision making. And I think that there's many of us that from time to time say, gee whiz, at least for that one decision, wouldn't it have been nice if we were a town council form of government and we could just vote it up or down and move forward? But we're not. And you know, perhaps one day a hybrid like Bar Harbor has might be better for us. But right now we're town meeting form of government. So we're never going to have the quickness, the quick step that Belfast and Belfast and Bangor have to respond to certain requests from groups. That would be nice to have, but that's just not going to happen because we're not built that way.
Yeah, and I understand that, Lowry. What I was just trying to say was it seems like anytime, and from a staff level, that can be burdened sometimes with a lot of work on a lot of the variety of things at specific times, to have another thing that is saying you shall or the town shall operate in a certain way. That's I think that's what I was trying to get at. I completely get that we're not a city council form of government or a town council form of government. I would say I would I guess I'll have to look at I gotta believe that my job description says that I probably am responsible for this. I'll have to look at that. I gotta believe it does. It should. And I feel like I've been doing some of it, but it's kind of been directed, and I appreciate, the political whim of the day. That's where sometimes staff or people are directed to. But I think that's the realities of it. And I mean, and I'm not trying to, belittle that point at all. I just think that, if, tannery and housing and Sagamore Farm are three things that the select board want me to work on and not work on, XYZ issue for the next year or the next 6 months because we work on these two meetings a year kind of scenario. Someone ought to be able to direct me as a staff person to say, Jeremy, yeah, we understand that this comp plan says all these things we should be looking at and trying to implement. But this year we need focus on, X, Y, and Z, and then we'll get to those other things. And I just think you need, in my opinion, only, I don't make any decisions for the town at all. That's a beautiful thing. You guys can just figure out what you're going to recommend, and the select board will do what they're going to do, and then the town will do what they do. The voters.
Well, I think if I could just interrupt for a minute, Jeremy, excuse me.
Sure.
What the wording in the charter, proposed charter changes says is that the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee has the responsibility to develop any portion of an implementation program to which it is assigned by the select board or the voters through adoption of a related article at a town meeting. So they're not going to be going off on their own and saying, okay, we've decided that, I don't know, additional parking on Mechanic Street is what's the most important thing. They're not going to do that. The select board's going to go to them and say, we've decided that we want to work on the tannery or high water levels at the harbor or Sagamore or whatever it is. And here's how we'd like you guys to get involved, because we'd like you to look at the portions of the comp plan that address those issues and gather together the energies of the various named staffers, committees, and other organizations to get them engaged so we can get all this energy working on the same tasks at the same time. This is not something that goes and operates independently. It's in support of the comp plan at the direction of the select board.
Yeah. I hear you and I appreciate that. I would still recommend May.
Was that Lowry just speaking?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
Lowry. Sorry, Nancy, that was Lowry. And Karen, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just want to back up for a minute to something that Nancy had said, and also Jeremy had sort of rang a bell for me. Things being put on the shelf and sitting, it's a question. These various committees that get involved in sort of behind the scenes driving the comprehensive plan is like the historic resources or something of that nature. Are they asked on an annual basis or a semi-annual basis to make a report to somebody like Jeremy where their things would not get shelved, that they would say, we looked at this 2 years ago, we're looking at it again today, this is where we are, that type of thing. So things don't sit on the shelf and gather dust, that they're looked at by the committees at least once a year, maybe twice a year, to make sure that somebody's got their finger on this, that it's not just sitting there somewhere.
Mark raised his hand. Mark, were you going to answer that?
Yes, I know at least on Parks and Rec Committee, about once a year, they have to go before the selectmen to kind of go over what they're doing and what their committee priorities are. And so I'm thinking that would kind of come under the same venue. Every year, the selectmen meet with the committees at least once a year, depending on what issues are happening. So I think that's already taking place.
Well, when I was select board member, I know that we liaisoned for these meetings. And they didn't come before us, well, except Park and Rec. But most of them, it was a liaison situation. And I'm not so sure that everything was looked at. If what I'm talking about is those issues that Nancy was mentioning that were relevant at one time or important in one time and was sent off to a committee and boop, it just went on the shelf.
Karen, I'd like to respond. Back in the day when I was on CDAC and chairman of CDAC at one point, work plans were started right before I left CDAC. And CDAC had to create the work plan and we had to report to the select board.
Right.
On where we were on the work plans. And the work plans are relatively new. I mean, I've been off of CDAC for a while now, but I would say there are no.
Just 2 years.
Is
2
it
years old.
just 2? Well, I think they may, well, okay, maybe, I thought it started before you, but
All right.
the work plans are relatively new, Karen. And when I was still on CDAC, they were pretty specific about wanting feedback and follow up.
Right. Well, CDAC and Park and Rec, but I don't know that a lot of the others do this on an annual or semi-annual basis.
They're required to. That's
Look
They-
at the
they
the
do
reason.
now.
select. Oops, I'm sorry.
They do
Jeremy?
now.
They
They
do
do.
now?
They
Okay.
do now. And what I would suggest, I'm going to talk to Audra and the select board about, the comp plan stuff, because again, not trying to comment about the need for an implementation committee, but there are things that each committee should be looking at per this document that was approved by the voters. And
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
what I think I should probably do is send a copy of this to the chair of every committee and just say, hey, remember this. This is still viable. We need this. This is important to this town. It's approved by voters. You had some work to do that's in here. Let's work within your work plan to incorporate some of these things, and I think that's where the check should be.
That's what I was talking about. That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Jim, Mr. Hurd,
Yes, I'm awake.
the county not heard from.
I know I was only going to mention that, excuse me, that Jeremy used the word nimble a number of times. And I thought that as I sort of reflected on the word nimble, that's okay. That's okay. There's an old book written some time ago that talks about the progress myth. So it's okay for me that things move along slowly. And I don't mind that we're not nimble. That's okay. Maybe there's a message there.
Any other comments from what we've heard from Jeremy or our current discussion? What people have said. Nancy, any other reaction?
Let me add, if I can add, oh, go
Create
ahead.
another
Wait,
level of
Nancy's about to say something. Go ahead, Nancy.
requirements.
I'm sorry, start again, Nancy.
I just would advise against creating another level of somebody, in addition to the planning board, the select board, and the town manager, and the development director,
Mhm.
that is going around saying to committees, have you done this, have you done that? Some of that, like the work plan, has been a request, and I'll just bet, I've heard that every committee needed to do it. I'll bet there were some that found that kind of burdensome and a little difficult, and volunteer committees. And I kind of think that's enough for them to be doing each year. And to incorporate whatever their particular responsibilities are within the comprehensive plan, then to ask as part of the work plan that they look at the items that are in the comprehensive plan that relate to them. Those could even be excerpted and they'd be given a list. And for the committee in the meeting to talk about what they would see as, say, 1 or 2 priorities for that year to think about and work on. And then turn that in as part of the work plan. That to me is a way to really, you want to get people in democracy working from the bottom up and not have too much, when they're volunteers, too much direction coming down from, above in a way, as they might see it.
Go ahead, Jean. Yep.
I like Jeremy's idea that once a year, perhaps, he remind the committee that they have certain obligations to review their work as regards to the comp plan. So that's again, there is just one person that's sort of in the back of his mind, you shouldn't have to do the work of the committees, but you're reminding them and sort of keeping it in the back of your mind. Oh, things here, or some things that are coming up in the town that they will be getting involved with. And then you might suggest, you want to check out the comp plan. How does this fit in with what we're talking about or what you're thinking about? That's all I mean when I say one person. I don't mean someone in charge of running it, but just being aware of what's going on.
Laura, you had wanted to say something?
Yeah, I don't want to be too catastrophic in my approach to this, but one of the things we talked about in writing some sections of the charter or recommended changes in the charter is that we wanted to codify practices that were already in place so that future administrations would not be trying to invent how they would process invoices, for instance. And Jeremy, you opened your discussion by talking about a whole string of predecessors. That at one time there was a code officer who also did planning, and at one time there was a code officer and somebody who did planning, and we've had, and we had an economic development director, and then we didn't, then we had another one, then we didn't, and now you've been there 2.5 years. This is clearly not a consistent position, and it could be if in 5 years from now or 10 years from now we end up with only a code officer again for who knows why, but it could happen. Wouldn't it be good if we had a consistently present committee to keep an eye on the comp plan? Because it could be if we get down to the state again where we only need a code officer because there's really not a lot more development to do. Will the code officer have time to also keep an eye on comp plan issues? Like I said, I don't want to be catastrophic about it, but that's why we have a charter, is that we won't always have the same people involved with the same skill levels. And the way we staff the town government may change over time. I mean, will change over time because it's always changed over time. Look at the services we share with Rockport now, and there's talk of sharing other things later on. It's going to continue to be in flux. And I'm just thinking that if we do something that's more likely to be here on a consistent level, maybe that gives us a better shot at managing the process.
And keeping some consistency.
Yes.
One of the thoughts that I had, Jeremy's conversation about these committee work plans and everything else we've said, one of the things in this proposed implementation program could mention the use of committees and their work plans, particularly in the section that talks about what the town manager's responsibility is for working with the department heads to make sure it's in the department heads' work plans. The very next sentence could talk about, and town committees that have been directed as a result of the comp plan should be included in their work plans. I mean, that's one way of sort of codifying
Mhm.
where the work can get done or can be, recommended. So we could add that, which would help add some muscle in a way to what Jeremy was saying and others have said about using the committees we have that are already listed in the comp plan to do all of these things or to work on these programs. We could add that. We don't have to name the committees. I mean, because the select board has the ability in their section of the charter to appoint whatever committees they want, but we could add that, and that might help make sure that, hey, the charter says town committees' work plan should include items they're charged with in the comprehensive plan.
I like that.
That
Yeah.
might help. Any
Good idea.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or questions for Jeremy? Jeremy, thank you so very much.
Absolutely. I'd be
Great.
happy to come back again.
Well, and if we,
If this conversation continues, I'd be happy to come back again.
I think it probably needs to continue
Yeah, I think so.
as a result of your information and the.
Yeah.
This is only our second time to get together since March. So
Yeah.
I think this will be an ongoing conversation.
All
And
right,
see how
sounds
we
good.
can absorb some of what you've said tonight and people's reaction to it and how we can, if
And
there are any
if
changes.
you would like more information from me, feel free to
Oop.
reach out to me too. If anyone has
Okey-doke.
questions about any of these kinds of things or how other towns are doing it or what other options are out there, feel free to reach out.
Okay, we will.
Free to help.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank
My
you so very
pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
Please sign off, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
We need to think about, what our next step is before we talk about our next meeting times. Do we want to absorb some of this? Read whatever notes we get, what Jean, bless her heart, notes come out of it and talk about how we want to, if we want to use this feedback we've gotten to make any revisions? Do we wanna-
Let me just throw in one more cantankerous comment here, is that the select board has only recently actively been liaisoning with a lot of committees. Now, I was on the planning board for 16 years, and it wasn't until Deb was on the select board that we actually had a select board member even show up to the meetings. She came when it was her responsibility, and Mark Ratner was very loyal about being there ever since. But before that, we never saw a selectman at any of the meetings. I've talked to selectmen, actually said, I'm just not going to that committee meeting anymore. It's no fun. They don't do anything. It's a waste of my time. So that's not a consistent practice. And if we want consistent practices, we need to codify it somewhere. We can't always just rely that people will do their best, because sometimes, as Deb says, they get overcome by events. There's other things going on. There's other priorities. We get COVID. There's all kinds of craziness that happens in our world and will probably continue to be crazy. So I think the more things we can say, we would like these process to be handled as follows, and have it yet open-ended so you've got some flexibility, but also have some clear reporting responsibilities. I think it'll put us in better stead for the future. And Deb and I were talking the other day, and we said, one thing that we should probably weave into the discussion in the revision of the charter is that we're not waiting 35 years for the next revision. This is something we need to look at more frequently and say, gee, I don't know if that means 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, but the world is changing at an increasing pace. And we probably need to have the charter open to some kind of study every X number of years to acknowledge that and figure out how it's going to work together. Maybe that's some of our struggle here, is that some of this is so very old. It's completely gone from anybody's memory.
Yeah, and I think, the place to handle some of that discussion that we can have as a group is really in the final report. where we talk about future discussions that need to happen within the community. Yes, Mark.
Mentioning the idea of the selectman liaison, does this committee have a selectman's liaison?
No, because we're not formed by the select board. We're more of an independent committee
Okay.
than any, because we're really not a town committee. We're a charter commission, partly appointed by the select board and elected. So we do not have one. We're not, charter commission isn't structured that way.
Okay, I can only speak to the committees that I've been on, but over the years, Parks and Rec, Budget Committee, Parking, Traffic, Transportation Committee, it seems to me that almost every meeting that we had, there was a selectman at the meetings. Now, that's only the ones that I was on.
Lowry, you had the misfortune on being, I guess, a committee that some people didn't think was very entertaining.
That could well be. Some of the stuff we did was a slog, that's for sure.
Oh, I think we lost Nancy. Didn't mean for her. to-
I could just comment, Nancy.
Oh, you are there. There you are.
Yeah, I could comment that I know the Conservation Commission had liaisons going to the meetings for years. I mean, back, I can clearly remember back in the early 2000s even.
Yep,
Mhm.
I did. I
the
was on
select
that.
board liaison would come
The
to
Opera
the
House
meeting.
Committee too.
What?
The Opera House Committee had liaison.
Yeah,
I know.
Mhm.
Diane, you were on. Yeah, you used to go to meetings.
I
used-
did.
I did. I mean, other than
Yeah.
just, not just the planning board. But I think Lowry has a point. We did add in the select board section when we amplified their ability to have committees. I think we added in their section of the charter that we were requiring, a directive that each committee needed to have a written directive, and a liaison from the select board. We could go back and look at that paragraph and see whether we also ought to add something about a work plan for the committees. And we also have I can't remember which article, a general section about how committees are supposed to be formed. And we could even add work plan in there.
So what's the difference between a work plan and what they're doing now with the directive?
A directive is basically like a job description.
Okay, and what's the difference between that and a work plan?
Work plan are what are your goals and what are the actions you're supposed to be taking during the year? What are you supposed to be working on, as opposed to a general job description? It's much more specific.
Okay, the work plan would be in progress, whatever's happening in progress. And the directive is going to be the overall, philosophy for the
committee,
long term,
the mission,
the mission, like a mission statement. Yes.
right? And then you have action plans.
Okay.
So that's what that is. So what is your pleasure? How do you want to work on this? Do we want to think about it and address any possible changes between now and the next meeting? Do you want a couple of us to come up with some suggestions and send them out before the next meeting? How do you guys want to move from here? Karen?
I'd like to go over what we had with the notes, and also look backwards to the assignments of the committees that you had mentioned just a
Okay.
few minutes ago, and look at that all as a whole.
Okay. So the next meeting, let's have this number one topic again. But how does this connect to other sections in the charter? The select board's responsibilities, committees' responsibilities,
Right.
and that. Yes, Mark,
Talking about Article 7.
growth management.
Yes, this is the article we're discussing on in the comprehensive plan and the implementing program. And
Mhm.
that's
Right.
what we're talking about.
And then how that might relate to the others, and I can't name it off the top of my head. The
Okay.
article that talks about committees' responsibilities and Article 2 that talks about select board. Are there places to reinforce what we've kind of heard tonight about making sure we're connecting all of the dots? And like this article talks about,
Counteracting.
yeah.
Are we counteracting something that's somewhere else in?
we don't want to do that. We want to reinforce as opposed to counteract. Does
So
that,
we
does
look
that-
at it as a whole.
yeah, does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, it sounds like a good plan.
I'm in, yeah.
One
I
of
have
the
a
things
question.
that
Wait, Les Lowry?
one of the things that we really didn't discuss much tonight is this determination or discussion about whether the town may or shall have a comprehensive plan. We just kind of, we mentioned it, but really didn't talk about it. So I think that that should be a key part of the discussion next time we get together, because that triggers other events.
Right.
Yeah.
And may versus shall. Okey doke. Since it's been an
have a
hour and I don't
question.
like, yes, Nancy? Yes,
Okay.
Nancy?
I'll phone you about it, Deb.
Okay.
I can phone you about it.
All right, that would be fine. What
Then
I'd
we
like-
won't need to talk about it now.
Okay.
Yep.
What I'd like to talk about are for future meeting dates. Janice notified me that we have some conflicts with Thursdays going forward. And she told us what opening she had. She can't have more than one Zoom meeting go on at a time. Yeah, Mark?
Is there a possibility of us meeting in the conference room? We can stay 6 feet apart in that room and then it can go out on the airways.
Right.
Right. Today or yesterday, the select board had a workshop in which some people were in the conference room and some phoned in. So I'll follow up on that. It would be ideal for as many people as possible to do that. They have a new camera system in the conference room now that covers everything, and I could see everybody when I looked at the first 10 minutes of the workshop meeting. So when last I spoke to Bob, that still wasn't settled. So Mark, if that would be ideal, and if we can do that, definitely. Regardless of whether we can meet in person or we have to continue Zoom or we do a hybrid, we need to settle, or we need to pick whether the first or second Monday or a second and third Wednesdays work, because we can't use either the room or the system any other times. So we kind of need a poll from everybody.
What time?
Well, we might do it the way we have been doing it.
What time of day, Deb?
Probably in the evening, 5:30.
I know that 5:30 is hard on John
Okay.
French.
Well, we could do 6. During the day is way too hard on most people.
Personally, for the next month, I can't do Wednesdays.
Okay. How
I
about
can
any,
do-
what, Jean?
I can do either Mondays or Wednesdays.
Yeah, me too.
I could do any day. Excuse me.
Yeah,
Lowry?
the only Wednesday I've got that's bad is September 9. But other than that, Mondays and Wednesdays are okay for me. And really, I can do any time after 5:30.
Okay, so 6 sounds like it might be a pretty decent time. I know when we get to winter, it'll be dark as heck. So either day works for me as well, because Tuesdays are generally my worst day.
We're on Thursday tonight, so
We can't do Thursdays going forward,
Okay.
starting in September. So we can't do Thursday. We have to pick Monday or Wednesday. So do you want to do?
Wednesday would be fine by me after the next 2 weeks or so.
Oh, okay. So September, if we meet next in September, a Wednesday would be okay for you.
With the
How about
exception of
you?
the first Wednesday in the month.
How about you, Nancy?
I think she hung up.
No, she's still there, Nancy.
Monday or Wednesday's fine, Deb. Monday, Wednesday are fine. I prefer 5:30 because I get up at 4 in the morning.
Okay, yeah.
And 6
Oh.
to 7 some nights after working all day, I'd be fried. So
Well, I'll try to have a conversation with John. I don't want you to be fried but I also don't want John to be fried. Because we know he has a strenuous schedule as well.
Quarter
Um,
to six,
Pardon?
quarter to six.
Right.
Quarter to six, compromise, 5:45. Let's see, we haven't heard from Bob and we haven't heard from John. Does it make any difference? Do you want to just shoot for the second Wednesday of the month? And if we need to do a second meeting during the month, we'll do that?
That's the only Wednesday I'm not available is September 9th.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
You can go on without me, but I'm just
No,
letting you know.
not
No,
the
we
next
can't.
time, Lowry. We definitely can't the next time. There may be another time when we can do without you, but we certainly can't
Yeah.
the next time we bring this up. And
Well,
I'm
you
out of town for 2 weeks, starting next Friday morning. I won't be back till the 6th of September. Do you want to meet the third Wednesday in September?
Mhm.
Fine.
Okay.
It gives
would
us
be
time to
16th.
absorb, to think about how we might want to handle this feedback we've gotten. That gives Jean time to type up some notes.
Mhm.
Done tomorrow to keep them in mind. Good Lord.
Well, I know, before we forget anything. All right, guys, we'll schedule our next meeting for the third Wednesday, 5:45. And maybe by the third Wednesday in September, the conference room will be open and we can just Zoom in or have somebody call in who's not comfortable with coming into the conference room. Jean?
That would be preferable, yes.
I know, Mark. Jean?
Also, I think we start keeping in mind your schedule going ahead, thinking about dates we're shooting for to have public meetings and
Well, we need to discuss.
December, in October, November, before we know we're going to be in the same bind we might have been before before this happened.
Okay. So we need to
Right.
tackle that next meeting. So we have two things on the agenda. Absorbing growth management issues in the article and how it fits in with the whole charter, as well as schedule going forward.
Right.
Yeah, because that schedule, as Gene says, will include public comment periods.
Absolutely.
It will also be a time for us to get together with the select board.
Correct.
Before I forget, I did get our proposal on the personnel administration. The committee did have a meeting and I'm meeting with Stephanie French on the 18th, if that's okay with you all, to talk about feedback from the personnel committee on that section of the charter. So we'll be able to make some progress and I'll be able to report back to you. And I'll do that before September, before our
Okay.
September meeting.
Right.
All right, I'll ask Janice to schedule us for the third Wednesday in September.
Thank you.
All right,
Good.
do I have a motion to adjourn?
So adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Well, favor.
Thank you all. Thank you all so very
Yay.
much. You can just leave
Yay.
the meeting and Janice will come turn off YouTube.
Thanks, Ed.
Be safe and well, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You stay well. Take
Yeah,
care.
stay cool and
Thank
stay
you.
well. Thank you all. I can stop.